It was a normal day, a time when the streets were full of people celebrating the festival. Mike, a father, was spending time with his son, Charlie, at a party. They were enjoying themselves, but suddenly, something strange happened. Charlie, while playing, saw a man that he didn't recognize. His face was strange, almost haunting. He quickly pointed the camera at him, trying to take a picture, but the moment he clicked the button, the man disappeared into thin air. Charlie was frightened. He quickly turned off the camera and called for his dad, Mike. But when he saw Charlie's terrified face, he realized something was wrong. His son looked scared, and Mike assumed it was because Charlie had been playing alone for too long. He tried to cheer him up by buying him some ice cream. But just as they were walking to the ice cream stand, something unexpected happened. Charlie heard a strange noise, a bird call from the sky. When he looked up, a large bird flew past them, and in that moment, Charlie asked his father a strange question that Mike didn't quite understand. Before Mike could respond, they were interrupted by the ice cream vendor, who yelled at them to come closer. But when Mike turned around, Charlie was gone. Mike searched frantically around the ice cream stand, calling his son's name, but there was no sign of him. Panic set in. He rushed back to the car and began driving around the area, hoping to find Charlie. After hours of searching, Mike had no choice but to go home and tell his wife, Kristen, about what had happened. Kristen was just as worried and confused. They both searched for Charlie together, but there was still no sign of him. As the days passed, Mike and Kristen became more desperate. They contacted the police, but the authorities couldn't help much. The police were unable to find any trace of Charlie, and Mike and Kristen were left feeling hopeless. Their world had fallen apart. It was the beginning of a nightmare. One night, Mike suddenly heard a voice calling out. It was faint, but it sounded familiar. He rushed to the source of the sound, following it through the house, until he reached Charlie's room. There, he saw a shadow standing in the window. When he turned around, he was stunned to find Charlie standing right behind him. Overcome with emotion, Mike rushed to his son and hugged him tightly. But something was wrong. Charlie didn't seem like the same boy he had once known. He didn't answer Mike's questions and instead asked Mike if he had seen something. Confused, Mike looked out the window again, but this time, he saw a huge, terrifying shadow that seemed to swallow everything in its path. Suddenly, Mike woke up, gasping for air. It was all just a nightmare. Or was it? A year had passed since that horrifying night, but Mike's pain and longing for Charlie hadn't faded. It was Christmas Eve, and the house felt empty without his son. On the evening when Mike Lawford finished work and was about to go home, he noticed a strange sight, flew past him and disappeared into an abandoned house. Curious, he followed it and saw an eerie painting inside. The painting showed a mysterious figure, and something about it unsettled him. As he stepped closer, he heard whispers, but no one else was around. Just then, an old man wearing sunglasses appeared. Mike asked him about the painting, but the old man remained silent. Instead, he handed Mike a torch and gestured for him to follow. Together, they walked through a narrow corridor and entered a hidden room filled with writings on the walls, words related to death and ghosts. The light flickered, revealing strange markings on the wall. The man explained that the markings were part of a larger mystery. Debt to the ghost. Mike asked the old man what it all meant, but before he could respond, the room seemed to shift. The next day, he went to his wife, Kristen, and told her about the strange writings. He believed that their missing son, Charlie, was trying to reach out to him. However, Kristen didn't believe his theory. She thought Mike was just imagining things. Frustrated, she left the room. That night, Mike decided to investigate further. He picked up his camera and scanned the area, but nothing seemed unusual. Just as he was about to turn away, the camera turned on by itself. He looked through the lens and saw something terrifying, an old house filled with ghostly children staring back at him. Startled, he dropped the camera. Meanwhile, Kristen, who was in another room, suddenly heard footsteps. When she got up to check, she saw a skateboard rolling across the floor. As it stopped in front of her, she finally began to believe that something supernatural was happening. The next morning, Kristen told Mike about what she had experienced. Mike, convinced now more than ever, showed her reports of missing children. He pointed out that many missing kids were found, except for those who had disappeared on Halloween night. He suspected that Charlie's disappearance was linked to something much darker. He then came across an old newspaper article about a woman named Annie Sawyer who had lost her own child. Mike and Kristen decided to visit her house for answers. When they arrived, they met an elderly woman who seemed deeply traumatized. After years of searching for her child, she had become reclusive. As they spoke, she mentioned something chilling. She had heard whispers of children saying, "Pay the ghost." That was the last thing Charlie had said before he vanished. Mike immediately contacted Detective Reynolds and told him about his findings. Although skeptical, the detective agreed to look into the case. After reviewing missing persons reports from the past 5 years, they discovered a pattern. Every Halloween, children disappeared without a trace, and none of them were ever found. The detectives' team found a photograph of a girl who had vanished years ago. Her parents had also passed away mysteriously. Mike and Kristen located the girl's mother, who confirmed that she had seen her daughter after she went missing. The woman claimed that before vanishing, her daughter had spoken about a ghost demanding payment, who confirmed that her daughter had spoken of a mysterious presence before disappearing. When the police questioned the mother, she was about to reveal crucial information when a sudden fire broke out. The flames flickered unnaturally, and everyone panicked. Meanwhile, in his home, Mike experienced strange occurrences, his lights flickered, and eerie footsteps echoed outside. When he looked out the window, he saw 3 ghostly children staring at him. As he blinked, they vanished. Shocked, Mike told Kristen about it. Determined to uncover the truth, Mike and Kristen sought out a psychic medium to communicate with Charlie's spirit. The medium scanned their home but found nothing at first. Just as she was about to leave, she paused and looked out the window. A thick fog had rolled in, and she muttered strange words under her breath. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and she started trembling. The air became heavy, and out of nowhere, her body burst. Mike and Kristen watched in horror as she... The police arrived soon after, but Detective Reynolds dismissed Mike's claims, believing it to be a freak accident. That night, Kristen noticed an old tablet glowing unexpectedly. She looked closer and saw a dark figure reflected on the screen. At the same time, Mike heard a strange noise and rushed to find Kristen sitting on the bed, crying. When he spoke to her, she remained silent, then suddenly took a pair of scissors and cut into her own arm. Horrified, Mike stopped her and bandaged the wound. When Kristen regained consciousness, she had no memory of what had happened. Disturbed, Mike examined her wound and noticed that the cut had formed a strange symbol. Seeking answers, Mike consulted a professor who identified the symbol as the Kurt mark. The professor explained that centuries ago, a group of Irish settlers moved to New York. A devastating plague soon spread, and the villagers blamed a woman named Annie Sawyer, accusing her of witchcraft. In their fear and anger, they burned her alive. Before she died, Annie swore vengeance, vowing to return every year to take 3 children into the spirit world. As Halloween approached, Mike realized he had only a few hours left to save Charlie. He asked the professor how to find the missing children. The professor explained that Annie hid in the darkest places. Remembering the eerie cries he had heard near an abandoned bridge, Mike knew where to go. Realizing that time was running out, the professor warned him that if he entered Annie's realm, he had to return before midnight or he would be trapped forever. Determined, Mike followed the cries and reached an old wooden house. Inside, he found a hidden basement filled with ghostly children. Desperately searching for Charlie, he suddenly felt a small hand grab him. It was Charlie. Overjoyed, Mike prepared to leave, but 2 more children clung to him, begging for help. He couldn't leave them behind, so he took them as well. As they tried to escape, a monstrous figure, Annie's vengeful spirit, blocked their path. Mike shielded the children while trying to fight off the spirit. Just when it seemed hopeless, the ghostly children who had been trapped for centuries surrounded Annie and weakened her. In the chaos, Mike managed to pull Charlie free and ran. As the clock struck midnight, Mike barely escaped, returning to the real world with Charlie and the 2 other children. Finally reunited, Mike, Kristen, and Charlie embraced, grateful to be together again. They knew they had encountered something beyond understanding, but they were finally safe. Now, they vowed to cherish every moment as a family and protect their son from whatever darkness lurked beyond the veil of the living.